I have a question for you. Why do some people achieve insane level of success while others struggle to make even small progress? Why do some entrepreneurs build million-dollar businesses while others barely make ends meet? Why do some students ace their exams while others work twice as hard and still fails? Why do some creators, athletes, and leaders skyrocket to success while others burns out? What if I say that the answer is ridiculously simple? It all comes down to one principle, a rule so powerful, so underrated that once you understand it, you'll never look at work the same way again. You'll never waste time on unimportant tasks again, and you'll get more done in a week than most people do in a month. I'm talking about the 80-20 rule, also known as Pareto principle. The rule says that 80% of the result comes from 20% of the effort. 80% of your success will come from 20% of your action. 80% of your income comes from 20% of the clients. 80% of your stress come from 20% of your problems. And 80% of your happiness comes from 20% of your relationship. And if you understand how to use this rule, you can literally transform your life overnight. But here's the thing, most people don't know how to apply it. And that's exactly what we are going to break down today. So if you want to work less and achieve more, get maximum result with minimum effort, focus on what truly moves the needle, and finally break free from the trap of busyness, then buckle up because today's episode is going to change the way you see success forever. Alright, let's be real for a second. Most of us work hard. We hustle, we grind, we wake up early, we stay up late, and yet we are still stuck. We are overwhelmed with tasks. We feel busy but not productive. We work longer hours, but our progress is painfully slow. Ever felt that? I know, because I have. You sit down at your desk, open your laptop and say, today I'm gonna be productive. But within 5 minutes, you check your phone, you reply to messages, an email pops up, and suddenly you are in an endless cycle of urgent but unimportant tasks. So by the end of the day, you are exhausted, but somehow you got nothing important done. Why is that? Because you are focusing on the wrong thing. You're spending 80% of your time on things that only produce 20% of result. You're working harder, but not smarter. And this is exactly how most people fail in life. Most businesses fail because they waste time on unimportant tasks instead of focusing on high-value customers. Most students fail exams because they study everything instead of focusing on the 20% that matters. Most relationships fails because we focus too much on pleasing everyone instead of nurturing the 20% of people who truly matters. And here's the scary part. We do not even realize that we are doing it. We think if I work 10 hours a day, I'll be successful. If I answer email and attend every meeting, I'll be productive, or I am productive. If I do more, I'll achieve more. Wrong. The truth is, most people don't have a productivity problem. They have a priority problem. The top 20% of the action creates the 80% of the success. The top 20% of the work generates 80% of your income. And the top 20% of your habit shape 80% of your life. This is why the 80-20 rule is a game changer. The moment you identify what truly moves the needle, you can eliminate the 80% of nonsense that's holding you back. And let me tell you, this shift is life-changing. Alright, let's rewind over 100 years into the past to understand why the 80-20 rule is so powerful. We need to go back to the man who discovers it, an Italian economist named Vilfredo Pareto. I don't know, I might mess up his name. It was the year 1896. Italy was going through an economic shift, and Pareto was obsessed with understanding wealth distribution. One day, while studying land ownership records, he found something shocking. 20% of Italian owned 80% of the country's land. At first, he thought this is just an Italy thing. But as he kept researching, he saw the same pattern across different countries. In France, same thing. In England, same thing. In Germany, same thing. The world's wealth was not evenly distributed. It followed a predictable pattern. 20% of the people controlled 80% of the wealth. This got Pareto curious. Was this just a weird economic trend, or was there something bigger happening? He started looking at different areas of life, and guess what? The same pattern kept appearing everywhere. He went into his own garden and studied his pea plant. Yes, actual peas. And he noticed something shocking. 20% of his pea plant produced 80% of the total harvest. That's when it hit him. That wasn't just an economic rule. This was a universal law. 20% of the input create 80% of the output. 20% of efforts create 80% of the result. And 20% of the causes create 80% of the effect. Pareto had just discovered something that would change the way we think about efficiency forever. But here's where things get interesting. Decades later, in the 1940s, a business consultant named Dr. Joseph Juran took Pareto's research and turned it into what we now call 80-20 rule. Juran found that 20% of the manufacturing defect caused 80% of the product failure. 20% of the employees were responsible for 80% of the productivity, and 20% of the market campaign drove 80% of the company's sales. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about everything. 80% of the problems comes from 20% of the causes. 80% of happiness comes from 20% of the activities. 80% of breakthrough come from 20% of insight. And that's when the business world woke up. CEOs, entrepreneurs, scientists, and leaders start applying the 80-20 rule to maximize efficiency and cut down distraction. And today we use it in time management, productivity hack, decision making, wealth creation. So the question is, how do you use it in your life? That's exactly what we are going to break down next. Alright, so we have talked about what the 80-20 rule is and where it came from. Now let's break it down. You open your TikTok or YouTube Shorts. Just imagine this. You open your TikTok or YouTube Shorts and start scrolling. You spend an hour watching videos, but later you only remember 2 videos that were actually useful. That means you wasted 80% of your time on content that didn't matter, but 20% of the content actually helped you. Same thing happened in the school. Imagine you have a math test coming up. Instead of studying everything, you ask your teacher, hey, what's the topic will be on the test the most? She tells you, or she might not tell you, but she tells you these 3 chapters will make up the 80% of the test. But even if she doesn't tell you, of course, only few chapters will make up most of the test. So instead of wasting time on less important chapters, you focus only on those 3. You save time, get better results, and still score high. That 80-20 rule in action. That's the 80-20 rule in action. It's not about working hard. It's about analyzing your work and work smart. It's about analyzing your work and work smarter towards it. But the big mistake most people make is they treat everything equally. They think every task is equally important. They think every subject should be studied the same way. They think every customer brings equal value to the business. But the truth is, something matters more than other. And if you focus on the right thing, you can save time, you can get faster results, you can achieve more with less efforts. The 80-20 rule isn't just a concept, it's a strategy that can revolutionize how you work, think, and live. Now we have already covered the what and why of the Pareto principle, but the biggest mistake people make, they learn about it, never applies it. That's why this section is going to be pure application, no fluff, just strategies that can literally 10x your results in any area of your life. So let's go industry by industry and break down how you can actually use the 80-20 rule to save time, boost results, and eliminate useless effort. Let's see what happens in the business and entrepreneurship in order for you to maximize the profit with less effort. If you run a business, the 80-20 rule is your secret weapon. Most people think business success comes from hustling harder, but that's not true. Here's what actually happens. 20% of the customers generate 80% of the revenue. 20% of the marketing campaign drive 80% of the sales. 20% of the employee produce 80% of the results. So what can business owner do? Well, step 1, identify your most profitable 20%. Look at your sales data. Which products, services, or client make you the most money? Most businesses waste time serving low-value customers while ignoring high-value ones. Example, Amazon make 80% of its profits from Prime members. That's why they focus on them. Step number 2, stop wasting time on the bottom 80%. Do you have time wasting clients who drain your energy but don't pay well? Drop them and or you can outsource the work to save time. Step number 3, find and scale the 20% that works. If one marketing strategy is bringing most of the lead, double down on it. Example, Apple focused on 80% of the marketing efforts on iPhones because that's where the money is. So the key takeaway here is that focus on the best customer, best products, and best marketing strategies. Ignore the rest. Now let's look at productivity and time management. That means working less and achieve more. Most people feel busy but not productive. Here's why. 80% of your workday is filled with low-value tasks. Only 20% of the tasks create 80% of the results. What this means? Well, this means if you work in 8 hours a day, probably only 1.5 hours of it is actually productive. The rest is email, meetings, distractions, and etc. But here is the action plan for productivity. Step number 1, find your high-value tasks. Write down everything you do in a day. Identify the 20% of the tasks that bring 80% of the results. Example, if you're a freelancer, client work and outreach brings the most money, so focus on that. Step number 2, cut out the low-value 80%. Say no to useless meetings, endless emails, and unnecessary admin work. Use automation, like scheduling software, AI tools, to eliminate time-wasting tasks. Step number 3, batch your work for deep focus. Instead of checking emails all day, set 2 dedicated time slots. Use the Pomodoro technique, which is 25 minutes work sprint and 5 minutes break to stay productive. So the key takeaway here is that if you focus only on high impact work, you can achieve in 2 hours what others takes 10 hours to do. Now let's look at the fitness and health industry. The minimalist approach to getting in shape. Most people overcomplicate fitness. They think they need a fancy gym membership or hour-long workout. But here's the 80-20 truth. 20% of the exercises give you 80% of the muscle growth. 20% of diet change result in 80% of your weight loss. 20% of the lifestyle habit affects 80% of your energy level. So here's the action plan for the fitness. Step 1, focus on compound movement. Skip the fancy machine. Stick to squats, deadlifts, push-ups, pull-ups. These exercises work multiple muscles at once, giving maximum results in minimum time. Step 2, fix your diet with the 20% food rule. 80% of the weight loss comes from diet, not exercise. So instead of extreme dieting, cut out just 20% of unhealthy food like sugar, processed junk. Example, removing soda and fast food alone can help you lose weight without exercise. Step number 3, build habits that stick. Instead of aiming for 90-minute workouts, start with 10 minutes a day. Focus on consistency over intensity. It's better to do 20-minute workout daily than 2-hour workout once a month. The key takeaway here is that a simple fitness plan followed consistently is better than a perfect plan that never followed. Now let's look at the learning and education. Studying smarter, not harder. The biggest mistake students make, they try to study everything equally instead of focusing on what actually matters. 80% of the exam's questions comes from 20% of the key topics. 80% of your understanding comes from 20% of the core concepts. So, the action plan here is step 1, identify high-yield topics. Look at the past exams, which topic appears the most. Instead of reading an entire book, focus on the key 20% that get tested the most. Step 2, use active recall, not just reading. Instead of passively reading, quiz yourself and teach others. The brain remembers more when you retrieve information instead of just reviewing it. Step number 3, study in short, focused bursts. Use the 80-20 rule for study sessions, like 20% intense focus, 80% of spaced repetition. So the key takeaway here is if you focus on the most tested topic and use active recall, you can learn more in half of the time. Now let's look at the relationships and networking. And for this, we always go quality over quantity. 80% of your happiness comes from 20% of the relationships. 80% of your career opportunities comes from 20% of your network. The mistake most people make, they spend time with too many people instead of focusing on the most valuable relationship. The mistake most people make, they spend time with too many people instead of focusing on their most valuable relationships. So action plan for better relationships is step 1, identify the most valuable 20%. Which friend, family, and mentors bring the most positivity in your life? Spend more time with them and less time with energy draining people. Step 2, cut out toxic 80%. If the relationship feels like constant drama, negativity, or one-sided effort, it's in the bottom 80%. Distance yourself from people who waste your time and energy. Step 3, build a powerful network. Instead of trying to network with everyone, focus on few key mentors and connections, attend fewer events, but make deeper relationships at the one you go to. The key takeaway? Well, focus on the right 20% of the people will improve your mental health, career, and happiness. The 80-20 rule is not just a theory, it's the strategy you can apply to everything. The question is, will you actually use it? Alright, let's take a step back and look at what we just covered. The 80-20 rule isn't just another productivity hack. It's a universal principle that can simplify your life, eliminate useless work, and maximize results with minimum effort. Let's quickly recap the biggest takeaway from today's episode. The 80% of the results comes from 20% of the efforts. Most of what we do is wasted energy. The key is identifying the 20% that actually matters and just do that. Now you ask where the 80-20 rule works best? Well, it works best in every situation, whether it's business, productivity, in time management, fitness, health, learning, studies, relationship, networking. It works everywhere. Instead of just listening to this episode and moving on, take action right now. So step 1, identify the 20% that truly matters in one area of your life. Step 2, cut out the 80% that wasting your time and energy. Step 3, track your progress for a week and adjust as needed. Pick one thing, business, productivity, fitness, studying, or relationship, and apply the above mentioned 80-20 rule. The biggest difference between successful people and everyone else isn't just talent or hard work, it's focus. Successful people spend time on the 20% that actually matters, while the rest of the world stay busy doing useless things. and achieving nothing. The question is, will you be the part of the 20% who get the results or the 80% who stay stuck? Well, if this episode gave you value, don't keep it to yourself. Share this episode with one person who needs to hear it. Tag me on Instagram at IamAliAziz with the biggest takeaway. Subscribe so you never miss another episode, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, focus on the 20% that actually matters. Bye.